Now,
Okay.
hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show, Dave Emmons and a Strange Reality. I come to you about twice a week. I put out 2 shows a week, different topics, varying topics. And each show, the last couple of months, have been really swinging from one topic to another. But we've got a gentleman tonight on the Strange Reality show, Troy Anderson, and most people might know of him and some of his books. He'll have 7 books before long, and Troy's actually been active in TV, and he's got a YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff that it takes for you to, I guess, talk about your books, so that people know you exist and get your name out there with your books. That's very important, and so that's what I'm here to do. You're not on the payroll, but we're going to market your books for you, Troy. Troy Anderson. Troy Anderson is a Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist and a co-author of the bestsellers The Babylon Code, Trumpocalypse, Trumpocalypse. Is that how you say it?
Trumpocalypse.
Trumpocalypse. It says Trumpo. So, and I'm always messing up on those kind of words. And the Military Guide to Armageddon, the vice president of COO of Battle Ready Ministries. Anderson lives with his family in Irvine, California. And more on Troy Anderson. He's got a deep background, and I noticed this as I've been involved in communications, but this guy has done it all of his life, it looks like, and he's a pro. Troy Anderson is a Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist, #1 bestseller, Faith Works Hatchet, author of the Babylon Code and the Trumpocalypse, the #1 best chosen books, author of the Military Guide to Armageddon and the Military Guide to Disarming Deception, former executive editor of Charisma Magazine and Charisma Media, and reporter at the Los Angeles Daily News, and a frequent guest on many radio and television networks, including Newsmax TV, Daystar TV, CBN News, and Jewish Voice with Jonathan Burris. He writes for Reuters, Newsmax, Town Hall, and other media outlets. He's the founder and president of the Inspire Literacy Group and Inspire PR Agency, executive editor of the Return International, vice president and COO of Battle Ready Ministries, founder, editor-in-chief of Prophecy Investigators, and co-host of Frontline. So you see, he's got a big background in this communication thing. The result of a 2.5-year journalistic investigation, his #1 bestseller, Trumpocalypse, I get it, co-written with Paul McGuire, an internationally recognized prophecy expert and former host of the nationally syndicated Paul McGuire shows, explores the rise of the Trump presidency and link to unfolding end-time events, the plans of the deep state and globalist elite, and what Billy Graham describes as the world's Nineveh moment, the Nineveh moment. That's a biblical expression. In the last chapter, an author's featured an interview with Reverend Kevin Jessup. I think I want to stop there because it's really, you have an impressive long line of things that you've done, and I know if I read all these, you wouldn't be able to get a chance to talk about what you're doing now. Trevor Anderson, could you tell us and catch us up to date what you're doing now, and teach me how to say Trumpocalypse?
Yeah, Trumpocalypse. Our literary agent came up with that title. Actually, there were some headlines a few years ago after Trump got elected. I think the New York Times and the Washington Post saying, "Is this the Trumpocalypse?" So we grabbed that and used that for the book title. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I've been a journalist for over 3 decades. I was a reporter at the LA Daily News for many years, other newspapers, and the last 15 years or so. I was a reporter at the Daily News, and a guy at church said, "Hey, there's going to be this prophecy conference at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, Jack Hibbs Church." And so I've always been interested in prophecy. These Jesus people, sort of from Southern California, made my little hometown in Oregon when I was 11, and one guy led me to the Lord, and he had trained under Hal Lindsey, the author of The Late Great Planet Earth, which was the best-selling nonfiction book of the 1970s. And so I've been interested in prophecy since I was 11. So I managed to convince my editors of the Daily News to let me cover this conference. So I go there. This is 2009, and my future co-author is speaking. Tim LaHaye, who wrote the Left Behind series, is there, all kinds of prophecy guys. And McGuire says the world is undergoing the greatest transformation since the Tower of Babel, a coming global government, cashless society, and universal religion. And when he said that, I flashed back to the late great planet Earth, and I thought, if this is true, this is a gigantic story. I'm an investigative journalist, so I introduced myself to McGuire. He gave me a copy of his book he'd written at the time called The Day the Dollar Died, and we became friends, and it sort of began this whole journey of investigating, are we moving into these end time events the Bible talks about? So that's sort of how this modern career shift began. And then since then I've written, as you mentioned, 7 books exploring Bible prophecy and politics and that kind of thing, current events. And we founded the Inspire Literary Group. We help people write and edit books, get them published, and we have Battle Ready Ministries and these different newsletters, prophecy investigators and Revelation watchers, and so that's sort of the nutshell.
Now, you mentioned the Tower of Babel, where everybody they can't understand each other. Do you think we're kind of in that now, where political parties don't understand each other or don't want to, and then different countries are in a back and forth about how things should be run and how things are really this is for entertainment purposes only. I have to say that on the platform in order to get this across about what the New World Order and the elites, what they're wanting to do, and the deep state in which you talk about Trump and his presidency. But I see that the babbling right now it's kind of like the Tower of Babel now. People don't understand each other, or they don't want to. Is that what you're thinking too, Troy?
Yeah, so the famous story in Genesis 11 is about the Tower of Babel. So after the flood, the people gathered in one on the plains of Shinar, and supposedly led by Nimrod, perhaps sort of some kind of Nephilim superhuman, and they built this gigantic tower, perhaps like a as astrological, occult based tower, perhaps even like some kind of portal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gathered together, and God saw what they were doing, because He told them to spread across the earth. And He said, "Well, nothing will be impossible to them." So essentially, this is sort of the first attempt to create a one world, global kind of system, a cult based system. And so, God confused their languages, hence, Babel, and then humanity spread around the world and eventually formed nation states, and that's sort of the system we have now. And so in my first book, The Babylon Code, we sort of explore this great mystery in the Bible. It starts with the Tower of Babel, the first attempt to create this global system. And then Revelation 17:18 talks about Mystery Babylon. And it's one of the Bible's greatest enigmas. And so Mystery Babylon, essentially what we say is that this is sort of this reemergence of the Babylonian spirit from ancient times, this push for this new global system. The World Economic Forum is calling it the Great Reset.
Mm-hmm.
United Nations calls it Agenda 2030. Sort of long been known as the New World Order, sort of this elite system to bring the world together, address climate change, try to end nuclear war. These kind of lofty goals. But the Bible warns that ultimately, the Antichrist and false prophet preside over this global government, and much of humanity will die. And so that's sort of the Bible prophecy in a nutshell. It begins at Babylon, ends with Mystery Babylon.
How close? I know a lot of people guess, and there's been a lot of people in the past, a lot of great pastors and preachers who thought they knew the end of times. And a lot of people are saying that now. And I had a show here a while back talking about that. I mean, are you getting the impression that things are speeding up, Troy, that something's going to happen that's going to either change us into the fifth dimension or have a reset of our consciousness, or is it going to be a total third world war? Troy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so Jesus and the prophets talked about 50 different signs to watch for that indicate we're moving into the end times. And of course, the Bible says only God knows when this is all going to happen. But if you just look at these different signs, it seems like they're in some stage of fulfillment. They're in the headlines often. These cataclysmic disasters. The fact that we can blow up the world now. Artificial intelligence, electronic banking, computer chip implants. You could actually have this mark of the beast system where you can't buy or sell for the first time in history. satellite communications, that verse in Revelation where the two witnesses are killed by the Apollyon, comes out of the bottomless pit, and then the whole world sees it. So now, for the first time, with television and iPhones and that kind of thing, that kind of thing happens. So those are just a few examples. So is this really it? Only God knows. But there's, like you mentioned, there's two different, uh, worldviews about this. Are we moving into the events of the book of Revelation, or like what you're saying, are we moving into this new consciousness, or is humanity stepping into another level of consciousness, and UFOs, all those kind of things, alien intelligences, and all these interesting topics.
Okay, speaking of that, I guess my background in UFOs and ETs. I wrote my first book about my experiences, and I get into talking a lot about that, but I try to get off in talking about other subjects that surround the UFO phenomena, and which is consciousness and us and how we see things, and who are these ETs and what are they? And you had a FOIA request with a FOIA request with the government, and you were studying this and doing investigative search for time travel is now. And FOIA request, the Pentagon reveals shocking discovery. Thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, request the Pentagon due to increased interest in UFO sightings. Did you kind of equate time travel with these UFO sightings, Troy?
Well, yeah. So this new book, the Trump Code, delves into the fact that Donald Trump's uncle is a esteemed MIT professor. He was actually asked by the FBI to review about 80 trunks of Nikola Tesla, the famous inventor's research, when he died in 1943. And Tesla, talked about time travel along with Albert Einstein, and so that's sort of the connection to the Trump Code book. And then here, as you know, there's been these congressional hearings on all these UFO and UAP sightings. High-ranking military officials talking about this, and like even my dad, he owned a fish cannery in a little small town in Oregon in the early '60s. He and all the fishermen were standing out on the dock, and they saw like an armada of lights up in the sky, a mile up. And everybody saw it. They watched it, and all of a sudden they shot through the atmosphere. So they figured they probably saw some kind of UFO group.
Yeah.
So there's been many people around the world that have seen these things. And so the Sun, Britain's largest newspaper, they filed a Freedom of Information Act request connected to these congressional hearings, and they fought a 4-year battle with the government. And then not too long ago, the Defense Intelligence Agency released documents. And they said that essentially the government believes that time travel is possible. It may be connected to these UFOs and UAPs coming through wormholes, quantum mechanics, anti-gravity technologies, and these kind of things. So it's very fascinating. The government is now saying that this stuff may be possible. And so my new book, The Trump Code, explores what kind of technologies exactly might the government have in this regard, and is it connected to the UFOs, UAPs, all these sightings and strange phenomena that's people are reporting.
Right. Yeah. I've had my experiences with them, but I think that the government's about 60, 70 years ahead of what they're telling us. And this has been going on for thousands of years. The elites have all the secrets. Like in Egypt, the high priest had the secrets there. They wouldn't let it out to anybody. King Solomon's temple, Hiram of Bliss, he had the secrets of building, and he wouldn't give it to anybody. He supervised. He had one or two, I think, people that he worked with, but they kept these secrets close to him. And it still goes on today. We don't really know history as it really is. I keep saying history is all wrong that we know. And once we find out the real truth, we're going to be shocked. Now, when you got into the Pentagon, did you talk to anybody, like any whistleblowers or anything like that, Troy, or did you just you saw the paperwork that you requested in the FOIA?
No. Actually, it was requested by the Sun newspaper, and but I did interview Mark Cypher. He's the author of several books on Tesla. In fact, he was featured in this recent History Channel special, talking about some of these topics, these missing papers of Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
And so, some of the, like you mentioned, like my first co-author, Paul McGuire, he's done a lot of research in this, and he believes that the government, what they have now, like you say, it's 60, 70, maybe 100 years ahead of what we see today in terms of technology. And so Cypher also talked about that, many of the things that we sort of take for granted today, wireless communications or electric grid, are all sort of ideas that came from Tesla, who also had theories on time travel. And so, could the government have, because the intelligence agencies have remote viewing. I just talked to a guy last week. He has a ministry where they have all these the Christians who have prophetic gifts. They have dreams, they have visions, and they actually contract with the CIA, and then the CIA uses this information for intelligence. So they have both Christians and occult people that provide the government with information. So could this time travel thing could be a thing where we have some kind of technology where you could sort of peer into the future, maybe take a picture or something like that, or gather information? Do they have something like that? We just don't know, but that's something McGuire had mentioned to me. And so yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't had a chance to really delve into this real deep yet, but I do plan to.
Right. It sounds like this time travel is kind of like your basis line for several of your books, especially with the Trump books. And what is, if time travel is possible, this is coming from your notes, how is it done? Do you know, did you get enough information to figure out how it's done? And was he successful in doing time travel before he died poor and miserable, Troy?
Yeah, as far as I know, he was not successful in creating any kind of time travel technology or time machine. But I mean, the government's been studying his essentially his genius ideas, and he actually claimed he received some of these ideas from extraterrestrial intelligence. And so it's all very intriguing as to what might exactly occur. And then another topic we explore in the Trump Code is the prophets in the Bible. How did God show them the future? Because the Bible has about 2,500 different prophecies. It's pretty much the only religious book that has all these predictions that Bible scholars agree have come true. They roughly estimate about 2,000 of 2,500 prophecies have come true in exacting detail. So, it seems to me one of the greatest proofs that God exists. And so, how did God show the prophets, Moses, Ezekiel, Daniel, Elijah? How did he show them the future? The Apostle John, in some cases it's visions, in some cases it's dreams, some cases it's God directly speaking to them. But then there's some very interesting stories in the Bible, like the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus is, transfigured. He's shining brightly like
Right.
this, like the sun. And then Moses and Elijah join him. And so, did Moses and Elijah, come from heaven, or Moses was on Mount Sinai with God, receiving the Ten Commandments, and when he came down that mountain, he was shining brightly. They had to put a veil over his face. So, and sort of a similar story with Elijah. So, did Jesus bring them through from the past into the future, sort of time travel of the Bible? And then there's a story about Jesus like appearing in the middle of the room with the disciples after his resurrection. I think there's I forget his name, but there's Phil. I think it's Philip. He's like popping around, just moving around, like in Star Trek kind of thing in the Bible. And then, of course, you've got Elijah and was it the Ezekiel? No, Ezekiel's wheel, sort of like this
Wheel
description of like perhaps a UFO or God's spaceship or whatever it is, his heavenly throne that flies around. So there's all kinds of sort of if you look at them closely, and I think Eric Von Daniken talked about some of these things in Chariots of the Gods and some of his books. So there's a lot of intriguing things in the Bible, and of course many different stories, in many different cultures and writings, throughout history.
Right. Werner von Braun, the missile guy, he was very smart and he knew a lot of things. And he actually, I think he showed people time travel. He showed a guy that I know, Uri Geller. He showed him he didn't say it on the air, but he said he showed him an ET in a frozen locker, a big locker. And he was really, he said, wow, it was exciting, but he didn't say, but I'm saying it, that he saw these frozen ETs. Now, speaking of that, what do you think about UFOs and ETs and time travel? You mentioned it, a couple of times in your notes here, UFOs. what do you think they are? And are we bringing them here from time travel machines, Troy?
Well, that's pretty much what these Defense Intelligence Agency documents say is that, we have all these reports, these craft are appearing, like Hugh Ross, he's an astrophysicist at a ministry called Reasons to Believe, and he knows a lot of fellow astrophysicists at JPL and NASA, and he says that, yeah, and he's written a book on this topic. He says that there's actual crash sites where they see these craft crash, and they go to the crash site. There's like, bushes knocked down, trees knocked down. Looks like something crashed, but there's no craft there. And so what's happening here? And so, I think what the government is starting to look at is, could this be interdimensional in nature? And could these, entities, whatever they are, using time travel technologies, wormholes, because well, the nearest planets that possibly could have intelligent life on are so many light years away. It's pretty much nearly impossible for anybody to get here because it's so dangerous to travel through space, and they're so far away, and you only live so long, so you either have to do time travel or suspended animation or something like that. But even suspended animation, it's the trip through deep space would almost certainly kill almost any organism that tried it. So how are they getting here? And so, the among Christians, and the ideas, and I've talked about it in some of my books, is, the Bible talks about this great spiritual battle going on between the forces of God and the forces of the devil, angels and demons. And so, could these entities be demonic in nature? They have technology, they're super intelligent, and are able to, pass between their dimension and our dimension. Scientists are now saying we have, at least 10 different dimensions, which is sort of what the Bible talks about. So I explore all these kind of things in these different books.
Right. I guess with what you're saying, how they get here, do you think the portals are that they're coming through portals here? They're attaching themselves and going through these wormholes and portals. There's actually, I've seen some actual video of a circular, like a tornado type thing, twisting like in a cloud, and then all of a sudden a ship comes out of it real fast. I saw several, and they're very real because the Navy had that video, and so they could be coming through wormholes or portals, and that's my thought about how they travel, and that's how they get here. Now, knowing if they're evil or bad, there's something that's stirring up our planet now. It seems like we have a good versus evil right now that's going on, and there's an agenda on one side that we're talking about, and I think you mentioned it in the deep state and that type of thing, the elites. And let's just jump right into this thing with Donald Trump, and this is for entertainment purposes only. What does time travel have to do with Donald Trump? And you've
So
written several books on that, Troy.
yeah, so I guess what I could tell you here is, in the Trump Code, this new book, it sort of puts together this 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle of how Trump fits into unfolding end time events. We talk about all the different prophecies regarding Trump. We just watched this attempted assassination. He turned his head right at the exact moment,
Right.
and he attributed that to God saving his life. So the Bible talks about God raises up leaders, he deposes leaders. So does God have a plan for Trump? And so in the Trump Code, there's these very interesting novels by a guy named Ingersoll Lockwood. He lived in the late 1800s. Abraham Lincoln had actually appointed him consular general to Hanover, Germany. So he had a government appointment. He's a lawyer and a writer. And during the popularity of sort of the Alice in Wonderland books, he writes this series called the Baron Trump Collection. It's a children's time traveling adventures. And it's at the Library of Congress. And so the drawing of the boy on the cover of the book looks like Baron Trump, President Trump's son. There's a striking resemblance. And so Baron, this little boy, guided by the master of masters, Don, goes on these time traveling adventures in these books. And they go to Russia and they have all these great adventures. And he's, from this, famous family of, noble knights in Germany and that kind of thing. And then the most intriguing part is the last book is called The Last President. And in this last book, this populist president is elected. But by the way, Barron lives in Trump Castle on Fifth Avenue in New York City, where Trump Tower now stands. And so in this last book, this populist president is elected. The mobs of anarchists and socialists converge on Trump Castle, chanting death to the rich man. And there's a civil war that breaks out, and military is called in, and all kinds of chaotic things happen. And so there's been stories in Newsweek and Politico and other, mainstream media outlets, sort of, having fun with this. Is Trump a time traveler? Because then, I mentioned that his uncle, was brought in by the FBI to look at Tesla's, time travel research and other, possible technologies. And the government may have used this stuff over the decades to develop all kinds of, top secret kind of stuff. And so people have had fun with this. There's been YouTube videos and TikTok videos, got millions of views. People, asking, does time travel explain how, Trump became so wealthy and became president? And, that's sort of fun. But, we never seen an interview of him talking about any of this. And so it is rather curious what, he may know. And so we explore some of that in the Trump Code.
Yeah, he talks about what's to come. He's a good predictor. There's been a lot of things he's predicted that has come true. I'm not politicizing here on this platform, so we're not doing that work. This is entertainment. These are books that a very well-known journalist has written. So we're talking about those. And I really think that they say they appear to be tall whites. There's an ET race, Pleiadians and tall whites. And if you look at Barron, and you look at Trump, and you look at his daughter Ivanka, and his wife Melania, they seem like they're tall, elegant, and they could be of a race that is here. That's my thought, because we in ufology we look at these different types of ETs, and they kind of remind me of that. And the predictions that he's made, and what you just said, coming up. And this is, like I said, entertainment purposes, this November 5th is going to be a test for all of us, I think. And even Europe is closely watching what happens, in our country, and what's going to go on. I wish both sides could come together and have some agreement, but that right now that don't look like the case. I mean, they just don't want Trump back in office, and there has to be a lot of reasons for that. And you mentioned it in your notes, like the deep state and the elites. Could you tell us how that is connected, why they don't want Trump back in? Is Trump going to mess with the elites and the deep state? We're not talking politics. I mean, just these entities that run the world, actually. Troy, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, so I'll sort of give you the background here. So as I mentioned, my first book was The Babylon Code, and The Babylon Code was actually an investigative expose of globalism. It was also an exploration of mystery Babylon and Bible prophecy, but it was an expose of globalism. And so this prominent pastor, it came out in 2015, this prominent pastor was so inspired by the book, he'd actually delivered an entire box of these books to the Trump team in early 2016. And then 2 months later, Trump announced that Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as his platform for president. I don't know if there's a connection, but I've always been curious. And then he got elected. I mean, he was down in the polls. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. And I remember Franklin Graham posted on Facebook, it's the God factor. And so that's when our literary agent said, hey, why don't you guys write a sequel to the Babylon Code and call it Trumpocalypse? So that second book sort of explored the role that Trump might be playing in unfolding end time events. And then at the time when I was editor of Charisma, I met a guy named Reverend Kevin Jessup. He's a descendant of the Pilgrims' fathers, Pastor John Robinson, who sent the Pilgrims to America aboard the Mayflower in 1620. And he told me he felt led to lead a national repentance movement, because that's sort of the main message throughout the Bible is we need to repent and turn back to God. And so he told me that most presidents from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln would often call for what was called like something like a national day of prayer, fasting, and humiliation. And so Washington credited this event with the colonial forces beating the British in the Revolutionary War and the birth of America. And then Lincoln credited a similar event that he called for in 1863 with the North beating the South, saving the country and ending slavery. But then we didn't have one of these events, a sacred solemn assembly modeled after what the ancient Israelites would do at times of national crisis for 150 years. And I did an interview with Billy Graham in 2013 for a 7-part WorldNet Daily series. And he said when God sent the prophet Jonah to Nineveh to warn them of impending judgment, that the king and the people repented, and he believed the same thing could happen again this time in America. So I was so inspired by that, and in my conversation with Reverend Kevin Jessup, that we called for a National Day of Repentance in the last chapter of Trumpocalypse. And then Kevin's an amazing networker. He persuaded Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, who's a New York Times bestselling author, to be the spokesman. He asked us to write the White House executive summary, and then it actually happened. It was called the Return National and Global Day of Prayer and Repentance. It was September 26, 2020, the National Mall. Quarter million people showed up. 42 million people watched this. You know, the first day of national repentance in America since Abraham Lincoln. And Trump flew over on Marine One and issued a proclamation for a day of prayer and return on that day. And so then flash forward to April 8th of this year, we had this great North American eclipse, went through all these towns called Nineveh. So I wrote this story for Charisma. The great North American eclipse, is this our Nineveh moment? Is this our chance to turn back to God? So to answer your question, Trump has essentially been opposed to globalism, this push for this new global system. And so the elite, the deep state, they see him standing in the way. They see America and Republicans essentially stand in the way of this new system that the world wants to bring online. And so this is all sort of coming down to a clash of worldviews, and that's going to culminate November 5th with this election, essentially, because Kamala Harris and the Democrats sort of are aligned, to a certain extent with the globalists. And so that's the clash that's going on here. That's why they don't really like Trump. And there's many Americans, we've long enjoyed our freedoms, our liberties, and many people don't want to be merged into this new system that we see coming online around the world. And so that's what my books explore, and that's the battle that's going on today. And like I mentioned, the Apostle John, warned in the book of Revelation that at some point there would be this Antichrist figure, this false prophet. They would preside over a world government, and it would be a time of terrible calamities and judgments and natural disasters and war. And over about 2/3 of the world's population will die during this 7-year tribulation period. And so that's the dangers that I warn of in my books.
It's a scary thing, but I think back also, I read some stories, I had it in one of my books, about George Washington, first president. Not actually the first president. There was another guy that was a president for a little bit, and he took charge. George Washington did, and they voted him in. But he had angelic appearances. He was visited by angels a couple of times, and they told him that he would win his battles, and that America would become a great country, and it'd be like God's country. And then Saint Germain was at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and he's a tall guy. So was George Washington, about 6'4", 6'5". And here we go back to the ETs or the UFOs, the time travelers, like Trump and everything. Entertainment purposes, people only. Okay, but they both, and the Saint Germain was tall, and he told them to write, the Declaration of Independence, and they were afraid. There's only about 23 of them there. Not all of them were there, the delegates. So they wrote the Declaration of Independence. He sat up into the balcony and he waited for him to be done. And he come down and he looked at it and he said, this looks good. He said, you will win. And he says, keep going. He said, don't be afraid of being, your head's chopped off for treason. He said, this is going to happen. So Saint Germain has appeared in history throughout Europe and France, and he comes and goes kind of like a time traveler, as you might say. Do you know anything about those early stories of Saint Germain and George Washington, Troy?
I vaguely I read a lot of books on these different kind of topics, Jim Marrs books and all kinds of stuff, because I've been a voracious reader my whole life. I do remember that story. I forget where I read it. And I'm also thinking of Manly Hall's books, like the secret teachings of the ages and the secret destiny of America. I think some of those books may have mentioned that story. But yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at your notes here. It's from a novel from 1890 is relevant today. Is that what you're talking about, Baron Trump?
And yeah, that's Ingersoll Lockwood's novels on Baron Trump.
Yeah, that's kind of spooky. I heard about that. That's been put out on the news talked about that a lot. You assert that there are many parallels between real political life today and a fictional work written in the 1800s. What do these strike you as more than mere coincidence? Were these time travelers that wrote these books back in the early 1800s, Troy?
Well, I mean that's a very interesting question. You know that there's been a number of fictional books over the years that have sort of seemed to come true. Like think about George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother, Freedom of Slavery. The sort of this Orwellian. And look what we have today. We've got massive propaganda, disinformation. The cancel culture, sort of this Orwellian surveillance state. Think about Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, that book we read when we were kids. They're burning the books, so now you've got all this censorship, rewriting history, that kind of thing. That's sort of coming true. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, this dystopian future that he foresaw. So there seems to be something mysterious about writing, and does God show people the future through fiction? Perhaps. He showed all these guys in the Bible the future, and there's many books like that. And I mean, I believe that people are given different gifts, prophetic gifts and dreams and visions and connection with the divine and downloads and all these kind of things. So that there's a lot more to like Hamlet said, there's far more going on here than what meets the eye.
Yeah, I was just thinking back, and I don't, like I said, that this for entertainment purposes, in my opinion. And I've been thinking back when they went and raided Mar-a-Lago for those, all those books or stacks, boxes of documents that Trump had. I'm wondering, since the FBI raided Tesla's apartment when he died, and Trump's uncle was involved in that, were they looking maybe for more than just political statements? Could they think that Trump might have material that was taken from Tesla, Troy?
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I think the History Channel special explored that question of Mark Cypher. Is that if Trump's uncle had kept some of this time travel research, then the government would probably be very curious to find out what this is. So when that raid happened, that was the first thought I had: is what exactly are they looking for
Yeah,
here? What kind of documents does Trump actually have? And so yeah, I think that's a legitimate question as to what was really going on there, or at least that may have been part of it.
right. Now the Trump Code, exploring time travel, and its American presidential history. There is more peculiar tale than we're talking about all that, and similarities between former President Donald Trump and the series of novels called The Baron. We talked about that. And could this fictional novel hold clues to the upcoming 2024 presidential election with all of its division and chaos? Could Have you heard anything about that? Can you? I'm not asking you to predict the November 5th what's going to happen that day, Troy. But do you have information on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's sort of the central question we explore in the Trump Code is, what's going to happen here in November, essentially. And I personally believe that President Trump is going to get elected, and that we're going to see a lot of chaos and chaotic events going on, because the powers that be are not going to be happy with this. I believe it's going to be divine intervention that's going to bring this about. I don't have any divine prophetic download from God. It's just I've been a journalist for 3 decades. I read the news, I study, I watch trends. When Trump first ran, I thought he was going to win in 2016, and then 2020 I thought he was going to lose, and now I believe he's going to win. So and then we're going to have a very chaotic time. There's been some guys that are considered sort of prophetic voices: Brandon Biggs, Joseph Z, Chris Reed. Had like Brandon Biggs came out with this YouTube video several months ago talking about he saw President Trump getting shot in the ear and blood and that kind of thing. And then Joseph Z had a video talking about the shot heard around the world in an attempted assassination on Trump. And we'd actually include Chris Reed in the Trump Code. He had predicted several months ago that there would be an attempted assassination in this June to July timeframe, which is what had happened. And so Biggs has come out last few weeks talking about after Trump is reelected, there's going to be some kind of serious economic downturn and all kinds of chaotic events going on. So I mean, only time will tell what's going to happen here. But these are some of the things that we explore in the Trump Code.
Right. I think November 5th, a lot of people were saying, you know, we're looking at chaos in the streets. And this is for entertainment purposes, and this is my opinion. And they talked about a civil war that's coming about. And I don't think that civil war or any of the chaotic stuff in this country is going to happen until November 5th. I know the other side of the political aisle, they don't want Trump to win. And if he does win, there's been actually several senators, and this is not, gaming the platform here or trying to, exploit, or something that's not true. It's true because it's been on the air. And I forget the senator who actually said that. He said if Trump wins, he said there will be chaos in the streets the next day. He said we will not let him take office, and we'll stop him, coming up in January 7th, I think it will be. And when they have the electoral, congressional electoral thing, and they said that they'll stop him then. So they are very opposed to Trump. And I want to know if you have any opinion of what I just said there about that opposition to Trump and November 5th. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was what do you think about journalism today? And what do you think about politics today? That I didn't want to listen. I don't want to listen to politics hardly anymore because there's all lies. You can actually see the lying going on when they say something. That's not right. Both sides. One side worse than the other. I'm not going to say who because I'm not going to divide my politics here. But there's so many lies, and it's like here we go back to the Tower of Babel. That's just the thing there. But I can't, and I know you've been in journalism for a while, and you've seen journalism at its best, probably 20, 30 years ago. But nowadays, journalism is not the same. You have some news networks that are for one party, and then a great many of them are for one party. We know that party is. What do you think about that, being a professional journalist, Troy, and with all the stuff that's going on with the news media taking sides and actually making the political persuasion push one side one way or the other just by the news media? Troy, do you think?
Yeah, so I sort of look back, I went to the University of Oregon School of Journalism in the 1980s and graduated in 1991. And so, it was considered like the third best journalism school in the country. And we had, great professors. And it just seemed to me like a very noble calling to, to tell people what's really happening, to dig into the truth, to expose corruption, to help improve society, keep government in check, all those kind of things that journalism is supposed to do, inform the public, help people make decisions when they vote and keep government honest and, leaders accountable, that kind of thing. And so over the years, maybe that was sort of like because it wasn't too long after Watergate. That was like, 12 years after Watergate. And so we watched All the President's Men and, Robert Redford and that amazing movie. And so, but in the decades since then, and especially in the last decade, we've seen, I remember I was a reporter at the LA Daily News, and somebody told me about Jim Marr's book, Ruled by Secrecy. That was sort of my introduction to all this. And, he was a New York Times bestselling author and investigative journalist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I actually interviewed him a couple of times, and he revealed a lot of these things about the deep state and the secret societies and a lot of these different, very, very interesting topics. And I remember I walked into the newsroom one day and I said, "Hey, I just read this book about Ruled by Secrecy. This is mind-blowing stuff." And it talks about secret societies. And my editor goes, "Shh, we don't talk about those kind of things around here." So even back then, there's sort of like an unspoken rule of what you can, delve into and can talk about. But it's moved from that, back in like the year 2000 to today. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's so much, disinformation, so much lying, so much untruth now. And it's, like you say, it's obvious to most people that, they're just, flat out lying. And it's called gaslighting. That's what they're doing now. They're lying so much that they're just like, they're bold about it. And so journalism is really taken a nosedive, and along with, the media not telling us exactly what the truth of what's going on, we're seeing our country, declining very rapidly. And it's a very dangerous situation we find ourselves in because, as a journalist and somebody that studies the news and, writes books and that kind of thing, I spend my whole day, reading stuff and thinking and, those kind of things. But most people don't have time for that. Most people are just trying to make a living and
Mhm.
survive and put food on the table and take care of the kids kind of thing. You don't have time to try to decipher what the reality is from all the deception and psychological operations. So it's a sad state of affairs to watch America decline like this. I love this country very much, and I really hope that that we can see a turnaround here. So I'm, even though I write books about the end times and this kind of thing, I'm actually very optimistic. I look back at American history and I see, times that Americans sort of pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, especially. We pushed back against the Nazi onslaught, and God used us to help save the world. And we've had 80 years of peace and prosperity pretty much since then.
Right.
So I think people are waking up now. That's the good thing. And so I think and if we do turn back to God, we could see a great turnaround. We could see, of course, there's going to be a lot of battles and clashes, but I'm hopeful that the American people will do the right thing here.
Now, we mentioned Trump and your books about Trump. Uh, we didn't get specific. I think you have a note here in your questions. Uh, what do you mean by the term Trump code? Is there something he knows, like time travel? We talked about that earlier. Is there a code that he knows that's going to happen? And is that what you're talking about in the Trump code book, Troy?
Well, my first book was the Babylon Code, and so now the Trump Code is my seventh book. In fact, the publisher wanted to call it the Designated Disruptor, and I thought, well, that's a interesting title, but I think it needs a better title. So I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, the first book was the Babylon Code, and he announced that Americanism, not globalism, will be a credo. So I thought, well, why don't we call this book the Trump Code? And it's sort of like the Da Vinci Code, which involve secret societies and that kind of thing. And so, and the Bible is essentially full of mysteries and codes and cryptograms and riddles and all those kind of things, especially the Book of Revelation. So the idea of the Trump Code is it sort of puts together this big cryptogram puzzle, this mystery, and helps explain this in the easiest to understand terms as possible of essentially how God is working through President Trump, working through America, working through world events, and try to lay out for people so they understand this mystery. That's what I mean by the Trump code. And on top of that, perhaps like you mentioned, perhaps the Trump family has some kind of access to time travel technologies that the government may be interested in.
Yeah, I've heard that they've had time travel since the 50s. The military, I guess the military industrial complex in which President Eisenhower warned us about. Your book, I want to make sure I mention all your books, or your newest books, especially Revelation 911. You look at the daily news, and we just been talking about that, and the stories about plagues, famine, and unexplained deaths. There's a lot of those going on. Artificial intelligence. What do you think about AI, Troy? That could be involved in a lot of this frequencies that could be messing us up. The 5G and all this. Have you explored that as part of the control factor for the new world order, Troy?
Well, at the basis of everything is electromagnetic frequencies. When you study physics and that kind of thing in high school, they teach you about the atomic levels and all those kind of things. And so if you look at the world in that way, so sort of if God did indeed create the life and Earth and the universe, it seems to me it's a gigantic mathematical equation essentially. And so even though we seem like we're matter and we have hard surfaces, we have bodies and all these kind of things, at the basic level, it's all mathematics and electromagnetic frequencies. And so if you look at things in that perspective, then what is artificial intelligence? It's sort of a mysterious thing that we've created. That we've developed computers, and now we have computers that are so intelligent that they can write sort of like how we write. They can come up with equations and sort of think, sort of like sort of have consciousness in a way. And so, the book of Revelation actually talks about the image of the beast. And so there's been, different Bible scholars wondering, could that be a reference to artificial intelligence? And, what kind of impact is this having on the world? Because with artificial intelligence, with all our surveillance state, everything we do is monitored now. The NSA and the CIA are gathering everything through our phones, our cameras. There's pretty much nothing you can do now that's not being gathered, at least by a computer. And so for the first time in history, you could actually have this mark of the beast system where you can't buy or sell. You have to acquiesce to the system if you want to survive, essentially. And with these new technologies, especially artificial intelligence, you could have this. So could the Antichrist figure be part artificial intelligence, part transhumanism, maybe part extraterrestrial? We don't know. But with all these new technologies and things we're learning today, these are questions that essentially, prophecy experts are exploring now in different books and shows and that kind of thing.
Right. I know a lot of people have, when they listen to my show, I talk about like ETs walk amongst us. Dr. David Jacobs talked about that. Vern and Mac, the professor, they all talked about these people, these ETs walking amongst us, and they could be the ones ruling and running our government and running everything else. The banking systems. These people go into higher places, and it's strange that, of course, I believe in it highly. I think I've seen a few of them. They're kind of little mysterious, but I think you were talking about now quantum physics. When you get into 5G, you get into quantum physics frequencies, and then you get into the big word now is matrix. They think, and you said something a while ago, that not everything is solid or what we think it is. Are you a believer in the Matrix, Troy?
Well, actually, the first chapter of Trumpocalypse, we open up with the Matrix story, the famous movie, the red pill and the blue pill, and so that's the opening to the book, chapter one. And so I wouldn't say I'm a believer in the Matrix, but that film series that Keanu Reeves was in opens up some very interesting questions about the nature of reality and exactly what's going on here, and how God structured the universe and all these different dimensions and the more we learn, actually I read some of Dr. Jacobs' books when I was in college. I remember reading those books and being fascinated by that stuff, and always been curious about, anytime there was like a UFO series on or special, I'd always watch it, as a kid, and
Yeah.
so I've always been very curious about all this.
Well, you have an open mind, and you have a consciousness that's really out there. And because I can see with your books, you're tying a lot of things in: time travel, Trump, and our world today, and then the Matrix. I want to ask you about the one other book here, your mission in God's Army, and it's going to be a new release in order today. I don't know; it's probably already released. But your mission in God's Army, what do you talk about when you're talking about in that book, Troy?
So after Trumpocalypse came out, I wrote the Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse with Paul McGuire. He used to have a national syndicated radio show. Then my second co-author, retired U.S. Army chaplain and Colonel David Giammona, got a hold of me out of the blue, and he was working on a book called The Making of a Warrior at the time. This is back in 2020, I think it was, or 2019. And God told him to sort of shift focus and write a book about the end times. So he'd never written a book before, so he got a hold of me. And when he contacted me, I thought, here's a retired Army chaplain and colonel. If America and the world would listen to anybody about the dangers we're facing, about what's really happened, they'll listen to an Army colonel, because I knew about these polls that said like 70-80% of Americans highly respect the military. So we teamed up together and wrote the first book. It was called The Military Guide to Armageddon. It was #1 bestseller. In fact, it actually hit like a high point of number 129 on Amazon. That was the highest one of my books ever went. And that was sort of like a sort of spiritual preparations for the end times. How to get your life in alignment with God. And then the second book we wrote was called The Military Guide to Disarm and Deception: How to Navigate All This Deception and Lies and Psyops today, and that kind of thing. And then the third book, which just came out on April 16th, or April 17th maybe, is Your Mission in God's Army. So this is sort of like the updated version of The Purpose-Driven Life by Pastor Rick Warren. Is how do you discover and complete your God-given assignment in life? So the Bible talks about, from the foundations of the world, God planned out our lives. It talks about how God guides the steps of a righteous man, that he has assignments for us. He has a purpose. He has missions. He has a destiny for us, essentially. One of my ancestors is Friedrich von Schiller. He's the poet and playwright that wrote Ode to Joy, that Beethoven set to music in the Ninth Symphony, and wrote a number of famous plays. And my favorite quote from his is, "There's no such thing as chance, and even the merest accident springs from the deepest source of destiny," which sort of aligns with what the Bible says. So your mission in God's army, helps sort of guide you to find your mission, your purpose in God's army. And of course, Jesus's primary instruction to Christians when his disciples, before he ascended to heaven after his resurrection, was go into all the world and preach the gospel. So that's our main job, is to spread the good news of Jesus. And so that's what your mission in God's army is: help you, find your mission in this army of God.
And our enemy, of course, is the evilness that's going on in this world today. And I guess if we got really political about it, we start pointing fingers at each other, and they say, "Well, no, you're evil," and with all the lies we want. How do we know who's wrong and who's evil with all the lies going on? That's the problem, I think. Who is God's mission, God's army? Who are they supposed to fight? Are we seeing it? Are we openly seeing it as we go now? You think, Troy?
Well, yeah, man. So the Bible tells us there's a gigantic spiritual battle going on in these other dimensions between essentially angels and demons, the fallen angels.
Mhm.
And so that's the battle behind the scenes. And so, it's being played out on the world stage, through politicians, through Hollywood, through media, through business, every segment of society. Essentially these angelic entities can influence our thoughts. They can communicate to us telepathically and that kind of thing. And so that's the battle that's playing out, and we're sort of caught in this maelstrom of these opposing forces, this great battle that's going on. That's essentially what the Bible talks about. So discovering your mission in God's army is not just finding out what your mission is, but also, getting engaged in the spiritual battle through prayer, through fellowship, through, fasting, the different things, reading the Word of God, that kind of thing, that helps you achieve victory in this battle, and navigate, discern, using different gifts of the Spirit that God has given us to navigate all this deception. And the main thing that Jesus taught us was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. And so he said that all of the law is embodied in that. So that's the main message of God, is that he loves us. He wants us to love each other. And so all this division and chaos is opposed to what, Jesus, wanted us to do. And so that's our charge, is to love one another. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Love, kindness, and forgiveness is what I take away from Jesus. Now, this is going on all over the world, in England and Ireland and France, Germany. You have chaos everywhere. It's just funny how it just all started all together, all these countries having the same thing. The leadership, the elite leadership, trying to change things on people, and people are fighting back now. What you're saying, God's army, they're fighting back on we don't want to be enslaved any more than what we are. Actually, that's what's going to happen if we keep going this direction, and with the elitists and everything. But they say, and I saw some interviews from across the seas. I'm not going to say where, because there's one country who said they will arrest us if we say something about their little problems. But there's been people saying there in several countries, they said they're looking to us to start the change. I guess they're looking for us to bring God, since we're God's country, they're like saying, prove it, start the world changing into a better direction. I'm a combat veteran, and I don't want to see violence. I'm tired of this violence and the rioting. We need to stop, sit down, and talk. And we can't get either side to talk right now. So that doesn't look like it's going, we're going to have anything much to do with it. Troy, it's been most interesting. Could you tell us how we can learn more about you? And you have a website, www.troyanderson.us, and you have other, I guess, sites where your books are being sold, Troy?
Yeah, all 7 books are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Books a Million and Target and Walmart, pretty much anywhere books are sold. And then you can go to my website, troyanderson.us. We've got several free newsletters. You can contribute if you want to, but they're free. It's revelationwatchers.com, prophecyinvestigators.com, battlereadyministries.org. And I've got the Inspired Literary Group newsletter. That's my main company. We help people write and edit books and get them published. And so, yeah, a lot of free resources and these different books.
Okay, I'll put that in the narrative on the show when I release it. Probably be releasing it tomorrow. So I'll put those websites and where they can contact you and your books. And it's been fascinating. I know we can keep going on, but we wanted to limit it to an hour tonight. So Troy Anderson, thank you so much for being on my show. I'm very, I guess I feel very blessed having you on the show. You're such a long time journalist and a successful journalist and writer. That thank you with all my heart for being on the show tonight. And I really enjoyed talking to you about this. I don't know if half of the country are going to enjoy, the books about Trump. A lot of people don't like him, but that's but we don't talk bad about the other side either. So we try to stay away from that. Troy Anderson, any closing words?
Oh, just it's a great honor to meet you, and thank you for bringing me on your show, and thank you very much.
And sorry about not being able to do say Trumpocalypse, Trump apocalypse.
Oh, that's pretty close. Yep.
Yeah, Trump apocalypse. Yeah. So that O in the middle is getting me all confused. Trumpo. So I want to thank you, and thanks to the audience for listening in on this show, and also take a look at the websites with Troy Anderson and his books. Good reads. I mean, this is if you want to look at what's going on today, Troy's got it with these books, and it's fascinating talk. Thank you for being with us on Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality Show. Thank you so much, Troy, and good night, everybody.